Good morning, and thank you for joining us in our continued study of Ecclesiastes here at the pastor's desk. I am Pastor Patterson, pastor of Faith Lutheran Church, and today we will be looking at Ecclesiastes chapter 2, where Solomon very much continues where he left off, talking about how everything is vanity, that nothing has substance. It's all a mist, a vapor in the wind. And chapter 2 will give us some more specifics that Solomon looks into. He'll talk about self-indulgence, all these things that we do for ourselves. And what are they? Vanity. He'll talk about wisdom and how even wisdom, being wise, is vanity. And then also he'll talk about the work that you put in, the toil to gain the things that you might inherit, that you own for yourself. Vanity. And so he continues in this, but we do get a bit of hope at the end of chapter 2, where he does make the point that God is the center. Without God, everything is vanity. But with God, there's substance, there's meaning. And so we'll look at that when we get there. So we begin Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 1. I said in my heart, "Come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself." But behold, this also was vanity. I said of laughter, "It is mad," and of pleasure, "What use is it?" I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold, and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the children of man. So we pause there. Listen to all of these things that Solomon is gaining for himself to try and find meaning. I mean, he starts off saying, he tests pleasure. Oh yeah, enjoy yourself. That's what really matters in life. But it's vanity. Happiness, pleasure, laughter, all of these things, they might last for a while, but then they're gone. And so he searches out more and more. He says, well, look at all these other things he did. I mean, listen to this list. I made great works. I built houses, vineyard, made gardens, parks, planted all kinds of trees, pools to water the forest. All of these things that he built and did. It's impressive. All these things, just doing one of those things would be impressive. Yet he does all of these things, and even more so. He gets all of these slaves to work for him. He has all these possessions of herds and flocks, more than anyone who had been in Jerusalem before him. He has more than anyone who has existed. He gathered for himself silver and gold, the treasures of kings and provinces, all of the riches that he could have. Singers, both men and women, concubines, all of these things. He gets all of them. But let's see what Solomon has to say about that. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. And whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity, and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. So Solomon does all of these things, gains all of these things for himself. And when he looks back, he reflects and comes to the conclusion that it was nice while I did the work, The work was good. The things in its time were good. But in the end, it was vanity, meaningless, chasing after the wind. There was no substance there, nothing to hold on to for eternity. It blew away. And so we see that the looking in on yourself to make sure you have things for yourself only, it doesn't last. And we see this in this pandemic. People are being sure to gather all these things for themselves because they want to make sure that they are well provided for and have everything they could possibly have. What's it going to be in the end? Solomon tells us that it's vanity. It's a chasing after the wind. And so he continues on to the next thing, which is wisdom. So I turn to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. We'll pause there. So Solomon here, very appropriate that he's talking about wisdom. He is the wisest man to exist on the planet ever, besides Jesus, of course, who is wisdom itself. But Solomon here is saying, okay, well, if there's no value in things for myself, for self-indulgence, if that is vanity, well, then surely wisdom will have some sort of substance. And it's important to note in this wisdom, in this book, as it's talking about wisdom, in Proverbs, often wisdom will be equated with faith. And so when you have this contrast between the wise and the fool, that's really talking about the believer and the unbeliever. But that's not quite the case here, at least in this chapter. This is pure, wisdom as most people would understand it. But he understands that having wisdom is better in this life than being a fool. There is more gain in being wise than in being foolish. And so he understands this and makes this point. But ultimately, as he's reflecting, let's hear what he has to say. So he says, verse 14, the wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceived that the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise as of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies, just like the fool. So I hated life, because what is done under the sun was grievous to me, for all is vanity and a striving after wind. So here is Solomon's conclusion to wisdom. He drew the conclusion of self-indulgence, that it's vanity. Wisdom, he sees that there's gain, there's something to be a benefit to being wise, but his conclusion is the same. Whether you're wise or a fool, when death comes, it comes for us all. And so it's vanity. It doesn't last. And so this grieves him. He hates life because, he's the wisest man, and yet his wisdom does not save him. His wisdom does not last past death. And so he hates life because of this. It's vanity. It's a vapor in the wind. Now he continues on to toil. I hated all my toil, in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Yet he will be master of all for which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. See, this is evidence to show that the wisdom he's talking about is not faith, but wisdom as the world thinks of it, because he's using this wisdom to gain riches for himself. Verse 20, So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun. Because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity, and a great evil. What has a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. And so we see that Solomon, in explaining, saying, well, let's look at the toil, let's look at the man's work, sees it as vanity as well. That he spends all of this time and all of this effort to gain something for himself, for his name's sake, but then passes it on to someone who may not care, may not value. And even in the midst of the toil, he says that, that even, at night, the heart doesn't rest. Because someone who is working so hard in order to gain for themselves or step up the career ladder, make more money, all of these things, they're so focused on this thing that they have no time to rest. And so all of this, Solomon says, is vanity. It doesn't matter. There's no substance there to cling on to. When you die, the work that you put in means nothing. And this is true for the Christian as well. We remember, very clearly here, Paul's words, where it says, what are you saved by? You're saved by grace through faith. Who gives that to you? God. It's not a work of your own doing. It doesn't matter how much you work. Your works cannot save you. Just like here, apart from faith, any works that are done mean nothing in the long run. And so all of this that he's looked into is vanity. Yet he continues and gives that hope that we very much desperately need probably at this point. So verse 24, he says, there is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a striving after the wind. Now it's interesting that he says this in verse 24, there is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. He just spent all of this time saying that toil is vanity, that self-indulgence is vanity, enjoyment, all of these things are vanity, yet here he says that there's nothing better. So why? Why is that the case now? Well, look at the next line. This also I saw is from the hand of God. Apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? God is the source here. God is the one who gives meaning to things. The things that you have, the things that you do, they do have meaning as long as it's centered on God. And it's God and sending his son, Jesus, to die on the cross that gives meaning to all of this. Nothing you do matters in the end. That's what Solomon is saying. But because Christ has died for us, has shed his blood in order to forgive you, that gives meaning to everything. That gives meaning to you, and that will save you when you die. When you die, Christ is not vanity. He is real. He has saved you. And so that is what Solomon wants to say. That the person who doesn't have God, everything is vanity. Nothing matters. Nothing has that substance. Yet for the Christian, for the one that Jesus has died for, they are saved. Next time we'll continue with chapter 3. God bless you.